This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are actually not in the studio in Colorado. We are actually in the mobile studio. If you've been following the show for any amount of time, I've shared with you that starting back in January, I purchased a new bus. Previously, I had an RV that I would take on the road and actually interview with guests. Well, we have significantly upgraded that. We were able to find a 2010 Prevost Entertainer bus. It was previously custom built for a owner of a racing team, and we found it at a consignment dealer in Arizona in January, right after CES. Fell in love with it, purchased it at the end of January. Took it to North Carolina, back to Legacy Coach, which was the original builder of the bus, and had some customizations done to it. Upgraded new flooring and some of the things like that, but also specified all new audio gear going into the mobile studio. So this is actually the very first time we are recording a show from the Prevost. So this will be the new mobile studio. I am actually sitting in Austin, Texas at the moment. Took a quick trip down here to see some family and deal with getting out of town and have my grandkids with me, etc. So I'm just sitting here in the bus today. Got done with some Zoom meetings and thought I would just do a quick radio show and share with you a couple things. One is just to give you an update on the bus. As hopefully we get past the other side of COVID, and we'll be doing more traveling on the road, that you'll be able to meet up with us, come on board the bus, check out the studio, and if you've got some interesting innovators in different parts of the country, let me know. We would love to take the studio out and stop by and shoot some audio, video, get a show out, put some YouTube videos up about interesting innovators doing work in non-obvious locations. This is part of the Rural Innovators segment. We've done a couple of shows on this. They've been pretty popular. And I really want to highlight those people who do not live in Silicon Valley. They don't live in Boston. They're not in Austin, for that matter, or Boulder, Colorado. But they're all over the country, in fact, all over the world, who are doing some interesting work in the innovation space. They're solving problems and coming up with great ideas and building businesses or solving really tough social problems by using their own personal human ingenuity, human creativity to really attack problems and come up with really creative, really clever, really elegant ways to make life better, to make people happier, more productive, better financial security, all the issues and all the things we talk about on this show on a regular basis. So that is, really why we do this, why we do the bus, why we been doing this show. Now we're coming up on 16 years. Next March, we'll click into season 17. And yes, Killer Innovations is now the longest continuously produced podcast in podcast history. The longest. We've been doing this, averaging 45 to 50 unique shows each and every year. So the back catalog is getting quite big. So dig through, find the content, search for it over at killerinnovations.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see a little search bar. You can put whatever term you want in it. It searches the show notes. If you're looking for a particular guest or a particular topic area, put your search term in, and you've got 16 years of content to pull up that content, and all the audio is there. You can listen to it. It's only been more recently that we've been doing more and more video. You can find the video on my YouTube channel, just Phil McKinney, no spaces, or you can find it over at the Innovators Network's YouTube channel. So either place, you'll be able to find at least some of the more recent shows. The older shows are only going to be on my YouTube channel over at Phil McKinney. So check that out. So what am I going to do today here? I'm sitting around the bus. Actually, it's turning out to be a better day here in Austin than it has been. It's been nothing but rainy, but got out of Colorado to get away from a little bit of the smoke, and got out just before a big snowstorm hit. And we literally just got the bus back, so wanted to take it on the road and figure it all out. Not go too far away, but put some miles on it and find all the little issues that you got to work on and fix. And so that's why we came down here. But today's weather is a little breezy, nice and sunny. I'm sitting here looking out the windows, and sitting back and socially isolated. I'm all 100% contained inside the bus, so have bedrooms and bunks for guests on the bus, kitchen, bathroom, shower, everything we need fully contained in the bus itself. But what I'm going to do today is there's been a series of interview questions that I've been asked over the years. And these are also interview questions that I've used with others. I recently did an interview session with 4 CEOs for an online event. And I reuse some of these questions. These are questions that I just find that are pretty insightful. They cause people to think a little bit, causes people to share maybe things that they normally would not share. And so that's what we're going to do today. I'm actually going to run through and just randomly pick out these interview questions out of a notebook I carry where I collect really clever, really interesting questions that I now ask others when I'm interviewing them for the show, or if I'm doing live events, webinars, virtual events where I'm asked to be the person doing the interviewing somebody else. And let's go ahead and we're just going to get started. So one of the great questions, and I'm not sure where I got this from, was the question about what is the most important invention in the last 5 years? So what is the most important invention in the last 5 years? Well, for me, I think there's a couple. One is electric car vehicles. I think is really, really interesting. I've had the benefit of actually spending a little bit of time with Elon Musk and kind of understanding. Now that work's been going on for quite some time, but I would really call an invention that's having huge impact as being something that becomes commercially viable. And in the last 5 years, I think electronic vehicles is really, really interesting. And all the spin-offs, there's a dependency for new battery technologies to make those viable and lower cost and more efficient, go longer miles. So when you see a commercially successful product, for me, what's really interesting are the technologies and those inventions that are happening behind the scenes that get driven to improve. So as the cars become more popular and the pressure is to put the price down on those and push that price down, you've got to get more efficient in other areas, manufacturing. But battery technology is one of those areas, and I've been talking about this for 15 years. We need to really rethink portable power. How do we create portable power? I would love to have my bus be all electric if I could ever make that happen. But battery technology is getting better, and with commercial products like electronic cars, electronic vehicles, and trucks and that's going to push the battery industry to do more and more improvements in the fundamentals of those things. Now, in addition to electric cars, I was talking about Elon, but Elon's work isn't just about electric cars. SpaceX, I think, is also one of those inventions that's happening in the last 5 years that I think is going to have an absolute impact. I don't know about you, but I was glued to the TV watching the NASA channel, watching SpaceX launch, taking 2 astronauts and returning U.S. American astronauts to space, launched from a U.S. based company, in this case SpaceX, to deliver them to the International Space Station. I'm excited to see what happens with future missions with NASA and eventually to Mars. I think space exploration is one of those areas that we do need to invest in because of the benefits of spin-off technologies. You cannot underestimate the side effect of those investments in driving innovations. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are in the mobile studio sitting in Austin, Texas today. And I thought what I would share are interview questions that I ask others when they're a guest on my show or when I'm doing interviews on stage. And this got triggered because just this last week, I did an interview of 3 CEOs for a virtual event online. These are CEOs of major public companies, billion-dollar businesses. And I thought, something, maybe it's not just fair for me to ask other these questions. I should ask myself the same questions. And I thought I would do that. So I'm basically interviewing myself today, asking the same questions I ask other CEOs. And I'll share my answers with you. So this is not rehearsed. There's no pre-canned written out script today. We are doing this 100% off the cuff. So when we started off in the last segment, I asked myself the question about what important inventions have come out in the last 5 years. So let me ask myself another question. This question is what is your dangerous idea? What is your dangerous idea? Your idea that is just totally disruptive, transformative, just totally turns everything on its head. And for me, my dangerous idea is to rethink education, not just K-12 education in the United States. This is education on a global basis. And how do we prepare kids to be competitive in the innovation creative economy? We've gone from an industrial economy to an information/knowledge economy, and now we are entering the innovation creative economy. It's no longer about memorizing formulas. It's no longer about remembering facts and figures. Look, I've got Google for that. It's about teaching future generations about how to think, how to solve, right? How to have a passion for lifelong learning. Because whatever skill we're teaching in the classroom today will not apply in 5 or 10 years. Technology and the rate of innovation is just happening way, 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 way too fast. So how do we prepare? I would argue that the traditional structure of education needs to be put on its head, needs to be totally rethought, right? How do you teach teamwork? How do you teach collaboration? How do you teach empathy? How do you identify and describe problems? How do you create ideas? How do you ideate? How do you take those ideas and how do you run experiments? How do you test your ideas? How do you bring together people with different skill sets and different cultures, different backgrounds? And how do you create those kinds of work environments? Because that's the work environment, whether you do that in the classroom, that's the work environment that everyone's going to be entering in when they're in the workforce. So I was years ago, I was doing work with the Singapore government. I did some work with one of the textbooks manufacturers building textbooks for the state of Ohio about how do you think about innovation and creativity? How do you include that in? Now, some school districts, and they were looking at doing reading, writing, arithmetic, and innovation, treating it just like reading, writing, arithmetic. And I was like, no, 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 no. That is not the way you think about it. You need to think about it as creative reading. And how do you think about applying innovation and creativity to reading and writing and arithmetic? How do you use math to solve problems, etc.? Innovation and creativity needs to go across all of the subject matter. That's kind of step one. And then step two is creating school environments where it's team projects, it's creative problem solving, and it's experimentation. And the key with experimentation, in my case, is also about teaching students that not all experiments are positive. You have a hypothesis. You define the hypothesis. You define a test to test the hypothesis. Whatever the result is, then whether it's successful or a failure, you've completed the work. It's not about finding that your hypothesis is true. It's about testing your hypothesis because you learn in that process. And that, I think, is some of those areas that in the past, unless you get an A in the test, you're a failure. Unless your experiment turns out perfectly, you're a failure. Wrong. We have to get and change that mindset in the overall educational model. We have to come up with ways where people feel comfortable that they can do an experiment. It can fail, but you still are successful and you still would get the A in the classroom. I've seen some really interesting work that's been done over the last 6 to 9 months because of COVID and doing remote learning, etc. There's been some teachers who have really stretched themselves to find new ways to teach and new ways to present materials. I've seen some of the material that homeschoolers have posted that has been incredibly interesting as to how to teach and how to prepare kids for this innovation and creative economy. So if you think about what does it take to be successful in the innovation and creative economy, it's no longer about the facts and figures you can memorize and the test you can take. It is about your ideas. Are you better at generating and coming up with ideas? Are you better at creating solutions than somebody else? Those are the resources that are going to have success. Those are the ones that are going to be most highly valued by their organization. And then the result is they're the ones that are going to receive comparable compensation to reward them for generating the ideas. So, my dangerous idea is how to rethink the educational model, the educational experience of students, such that we can take them from a memorization, test-taking, conformity kind of model of today's educational system and prepare them to be highly successful in this innovation, creative economy, where the value of somebody's participation and contribution to the organization they're part of is not their muscles, it's about their ideas. Organizations will value those ideas, and that will constitute success, both from a career perspective, but also self-satisfaction. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are in the new mobile studio and talking today about the questions that I tend to ask others when I'm interviewing them, whether it's for this podcast or for the radio show, or if I'm on stage when we were doing live events, or most recently last week, CEOs that I was doing a virtual event where I was interviewing 3 CEOs. So I've asked 2 questions so far. The third question that I think I've asked, and I get some pretty interesting answers to, is what are you optimistic about? What are you optimistic about? Now, given the timing of this recording, we're going into the U.S. elections. We're at the end of October of 2020. The uncertainty of what happens with the election and who becomes the new president and what happens to all the things that are going on. Pile on top of that, COVID. Pile on top of that, the fires we've had in Colorado. 3 of the 5 largest fires in Colorado history have all burned in 2020. The fires in California over the last 2 to 3 years. You talk about social unrest. You talk about refugees from countries where they're trying to get away from violence. You could sit back and go, there's really not a lot to be optimistic about, but I would say you were wrong. There's still a lot to be optimistic about. Now, I don't know what the final answer is. I'm not that smart. There's other people I know working on it and a lot of experts, etc. But when you look at times when the world faced some really tough issues and tough challenges, human ingenuity, our ability to grab ourselves by our shoelaces and come together and find solutions and work together and bring creativity to it. I'm always optimistic, highly, highly optimistic about the power of human ingenuity. You think about back when polio was rampant and we had, kids suffering from polio and partially crippled, or back in the days of iron lungs. I had an aunt who came down with polio as a child, right? And she was impacted through her entire life. She never let her slow her down, but there was a concerted effort. We saw the issue, we saw that problem. Scientists went after it. They came up with the polio vaccine, and now we haven't seen any kind of major breakouts of polio for many, many, many decades. I think the same thing's going to happen with COVID. I think the same thing's going to happen with whatever, right? I am highly optimistic that when we are face to face with the biggest problems that could really just crush us, that's the time when we double down and we say, not us. We will find a solution. We will be the ones to innovate a way around this. We are going to solve this, and we're going to make people's lives better. That's when the human race steps up. That's what makes humans unique. Now, I didn't say Americans or Europe, humans. This is where, as humans, we come together because we can solve this problem. We can solve any problem when we can come together and we can and work together and bring our best and brightest and most creative people and put them together and task them with solving the problem and letting human ingenuity win. That is what I am optimistic about. I will never underestimate the power of human ingenuity to solve society's worst problems. We've done it. We've done it for thousands of years. We're going to do it for thousands of years. Now we can go on social media and we can, complain and, oh, woe is me, and society is, oh, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. I think, when I look in the faces of my grandchildren or my kids or others, my teams that I work with every day, which are just amazingly highly creative people, When I see what you do when we unleash the human potential, there is nothing, absolutely nothing we cannot solve, but we solve it best working together, not against each other. So, what am I optimistic about? The power of human ingenuity. Okay, let's see. Let's think about another. This is a quick question. What have you changed your mind about? Now, this is an interesting question I posed to a number of people. And this is because people, again, what we're facing today is people make up their mind and then we just kind of lock in and we never change our mind. We never are willing to say, you know something, maybe I wasn't right. Maybe I should be thinking this and I should change, my ideas, right? And I think there's actually lots of times when I've changed my idea where I thought I knew something. A lot of it is, I've had an assumption or an opinion around a particular technology and just thought it was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And guess what? I had it wrong. I changed my idea. It wasn't quite, what I panned out with. Now those things are easy. The hard ones are you willing to really listen and consider somebody else's perspective on things like, I don't know, your politics, your belief of, some famous person. You either like them or hate them. Have you ever flipped your position? If you're into sports, do you like, Stephen Curry and you just love him, or do you hate them? Do you ever flip? Do you ever switch? No, look, I'm a Pete Rose, Johnny Bench fan, baseball, Big Red Machine, Cincinnati Reds. A lot of people, flipped or didn't like Pete Rose when he got into his gambling troubles. Did I change my opinion? No. That's human. I think that's a little bit normal, right? People kind of lock in, and then when things get tough, you just dig your heels in. The real purpose when I ask this question when I'm interviewing somebody else is do they recognize that maybe we're so locked in on an opinion or an individual or a person that we're just not even willing to even consider the idea of switching that opinion. And I think that's the real challenge for all of us. So what have you changed your mind about? In my case, the technology pieces and things that I might have gotten wrong were kind of were ones that, those are a little bit easier to accept and change your mind on. But have you really changed your mind on something that is very personal, very significant, very I don't know, kind of identity, are you classified as being somebody of a certain party and therefore, you just vote that party? Do you believe in certain people, maybe a politician, no matter what anybody else says about that politician? You either love that person or you hate that person. Have you changed your mind? Now, it's easy to say, nope, I don't need to change my mind. You need to change your mind, and the world is great. I'm fine. That's the typical issue of all change. You go into any organization, you say, do the staff understand change is important? Yeah, everybody's, nope, we got to know the world's changing. We got to change with it. But when you really peel it down, what people are really saying is, yep, we got to change. If you would change, we would be great. I don't need to change. And that's the flaw. We all need to change, not 50% of us or 75% of us. 100% of us need to change and need to be willing to change. So are you willing to consider changing your mind? What is that change? For me, I'll admit, easy to change the easy stuff, very hard to change the big things that I am passionate about and I'm willing to dig my heels in. But this question is a challenging one and one that I continue to think about. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. We are wrapping up today's show, asking myself questions that I always typically use when I'm interviewing others. So this is a little bit of turning the tables, asking myself those questions. So one question that gets an interesting response depending on the whoever it is I'm interviewing, whether they're public sector, private sector, government, all have differing and varying opinions on it. But it is a question about government. And that question is what should be the role of government in encouraging innovation? What should be the role of government in encouraging innovation? Now, I grew up, I'm 60 this year. Yep, I'm clicked over on the big 60. And when it comes to my own line, I look back and look at the government. I saw phenomenal spin outs, technologies, new innovations, things that transform people's lives as a result of government investment into research and development, including the space program, putting Neil Armstrong on the moon. I remember as a kid sitting in front of the TV watching live Neil Armstrong stepping onto the moon. Now you think, okay, that's a rocket and getting, where was the spinoff? There were literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of innovations that spun off from the NASA programs, putting man on the moon. Probably the one that you're most familiar with is the blood oximeters, the thing you stick your finger in when you go into the doctor's office while they're putting you on the scale to weigh you, and it tells them how much oxygen is in your blood. Came from the Apollo program. They had hooked up the astronauts in order to measure how much oxygen, CO2, etc., was in the blood. That's a direct result of the Apollo program. And there are literally hundreds and thousands. I used to be a regular subscriber to a magazine called NASA Tech Briefs, and this was listing all of the spin-out technologies and all the licensing deals that NASA was doing with NASA technologies. Now, you probably got this radio show, you're listening to this being streamed if you happen to be on Spotify or iHeart or iTunes or Google or wherever you're getting this show from. How did you get it? How did you download it? How are you streaming it? Across the internet. Internet came from DARPA, the Defense Agency Research Programs. So DARPA is a government-funded, came from the Department of Defense, originally was designed as a network that would be highly resilient should, the Russians, drop some big bomb on the United States. We could still communicate with a new kind of network technology. And eventually, that is what became the internet. So you're getting all this today, listening to this, you're searching, going to go shop at Amazon or buying online stuff or watching YouTube videos. It's all as a result of government-funded research. And where I think a lot of governments underestimate is that impact of those investments. It doesn't matter whether it's the United States or China, Canada, the UK. Governments have a role. The governments can invest in areas that are going to be transformative to their society, transformative to their citizens, transformative to their businesses, and most important, transformative to their economy. People having and unleashing new jobs, new careers, new industries, new opportunities for economic growth, more just overall satisfaction in people's lives with the results of these, improved health care, improved education. All of these can be spin-offs if the governments would take seriously thinking about what are the right investments. Now, everyone's got their pet project, or in the United States we call, pork belly projects where you just throw money at it and it's not very well spent. Well thought out R&D investment, well thought out innovation investment will have long-term effects, and that is the role of government. not just federal governments, but also provincials or state governments, and even local municipalities can play a role in investing in R&D and encouraging innovation and having that impact. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. That's all the questions we have time for today. If you found this interesting, let me know, because I've got pages and pages of these questions. If you've got a question you want me to answer, just go ahead and drop me a note, phil@killerinnovations.com. More than willing to answer them. In fact, I don't think there's been very many questions I've tried to dodge. You ask the question, as long as it doesn't get, too personal. My wife's not into me revealing a lot of information about her. But if you've got a question, pose it. Would love to answer it. If you would find that interesting, go ahead and drop it, phil@killerinnovations.com. Also, don't forget, hop on over to killerinnovations.com, check out the show notes. Use the search bar in the upper right-hand corner of the page. It's actually right above the column on the right-hand side of the Killer Innovations page. You can put any search term in there, and it'll go through its 15 and a half plus years of shows. So there's a lot of content posted over there. The blog is over at philmckinney.com. And if you're interested in reading about innovation creativity and how I do it and the tools and approaches, you can get all of that over at Beyond the Obvious is the name of my book, or you can go to beyondtheobvious.com and check it out all over at that place. I would also encourage you to hop on over to the Innovators Network. The Innovators Network is a group of innovators, chief innovation officers, CTOs, who actually live this day in and day out. If your organization needs help or needs guidance or needs help, go over to the innovators.network, and you can find out information there. You can also ask for help, and one of the people in the network will reach out and offer to give you advice or feedback or help guide you through the process of making your organization more productive, more innovative, more creative, where you can go out and change the world. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Doing this from Austin, Texas, from the mobile studio. And we'll talk to you next week here on Killer Innovations.